right. So with sales materials, it's really important to provide that first impression, right? You're increasing trust with all your materials and your communications. You have this incredible opportunity to truly tell your story in a clear, succinct way. And with your sales materials, you're staying top of mind.
I'd like to add something about trust on this, because it's so top of mind these days. And that is, when people see your sales materials and they see that they're well organized and well presented and that they're clean, that builds trust, because you know that that's what they're bringing to your project, right? So we'll talk about it more, but super important
Yeah,
point there.
I love that, because there's respect, right? In honoring, with having thoughtful materials with integrity that are authentic to you and the organization. That really sets a tone and sets a strong first impression.
And people sometimes say, oh, consumers don't get it. Everybody's really smart, especially now, that we're exposed to so many materials. We're making all these judgments really quickly. So speak up to your clients as opposed to down. Go ahead, Nicole. You want to talk about the importance?
Sure. Yes. Let's talk about the importance of sales materials. This is just a reminder. You all know much of this, but let's drop into this a little bit. Your sales materials convey your brand values and your belief in your position. You may not realize it, but all of that is being communicated really strongly through each and every sales material and every interaction. So it's important that you allow your values and beliefs and position to shine through, right? Because the recipient of that material is going to see if that aligns with their beliefs and values, right? And we all like to be affiliated with organizations and people who we align with. So you're conveying that all throughout your sales materials, and it's important to show that. You're creating emotional connections with people through your sales materials by use of color, by specific words you're using. And we don't have a lot of time these days. People are moving really quickly. And so in a short amount of time, we're conveying a lot of information, and that's an emotional connection. And people really need to see if that mirrors, how they feel and their values, beliefs, and opinions. So don't forget that you really want to convey an emotional connection, especially today when so many messages are being being thrown at us. You're leaving a strong impression, whether it's a first impression or it's the last thing you leave before you go away. That's a very important lasting impression through all of these materials that we're going to touch on. You're informing the brand perception. So you're giving a taste of what your brand is all about. And this is really important as you communicate across your brand ecosystem. You're setting expectations. How are these people going to treat me? Do they value my time based on how they're communicating in their sales materials? Do they see me as an intelligent person? Janine mentioned that earlier. People are smart. We're having to bump up the level of our marketing and sales materials rather significantly, because we need to match people where they are, right? And that goes for their level of knowledge and intelligence. So it's imperative that you do a ton of research into the audience before you go about drafting a single sentence or choosing the color, right? Your materials tell your story well before you get there, and they remind you of who left right after you've gone. So whether it's across a one sheet or a website or, whatever it may be, an email campaign, it tells a story before you even arrive in on a Zoom call if you have a personal interaction, right? So it's really important that you realize that that whole story is being told. You're laying all these breadcrumbs and putting all your breadcrumbs out there, right? And your sales materials enforce collaboration and thinking, right? They start to set the tone and the pace. A lot of times with sales materials, we're needing to bring people along. And so a lot of times we're needing to educate and validate, right? Right in those sales materials. And these are ways to collaborate with your audience and get them thinking along the lines of what you're doing.
And another aspect of the thinking and collaboration, Nicole and I like to say that collateral materials and websites are often the tail that wags the dog, because people within your organization have to commit to what they're going to say in them. And so suddenly they don't want to commit like that. Suddenly they go, no, that's not what we do. So you get, whoops, did I just do, I'm sorry about that. That looks, my chair.
An excited presenter.
My chair hit my thing here. I'm going to go right. Oops, there we go. Anyway, the point is that when you do a website, you engage everybody in your organization because they have to be represented. And suddenly collaboration and thinking go to a whole new level, which usually really helps the organization. We use that as a strategy device within organizations that we work with. So let's move on to this. So I'll just talk a little bit about this, which is that, when you said, I don't know if you saw when we sent this out, you went sales materials. Who does sales materials anymore? Well, there's tons of them. So almost everything that we're putting out is a sales material, right? So, whether it's a LinkedIn flow, it's ads and social. Obviously, websites and landing pages are usually the first place where somebody's going to engage with you before closing a sale, right? Photography and video couldn't be more important today. And I know you know this about video. It's a little bit of a pain because you have to do it. But on the other hand, we all have cameras on our computers. And the response rates to video across the board in advertising is so strong. So you definitely want to think about it, but you have to be very thoughtful. You have to let people know. They're usually fast. They have to know what the topic is. You have to tell them what you want them to know, right? And demonstrate it. We all do millions of presentations. And so in the presentation world, it's so much more effective, or often very effective, to use imagery, right? So we're going to talk about photos a little later. I don't know how many people use one sheets, but we're big believers in them. They are a condensation of your website, right? Sure, anybody can go to your website, but who amongst us would prefer to just click on something and have it be all there for us versus having to go look for something, right? It seems like the easier things become, the more lazy we are and the less we want to click on things. So we're always looking for, how do we make it easier? How do we make our, get our message and ask less of the recipient of our information, right? It's one of the things that we're always looking at. So one sheets do that. There it is. It's connected. Got to be careful of PDFs because some people, like journalists, won't open them. So that's another topic to think about. But what's beautiful, I'm going to go on to content and white papers and ebooks. What's beautiful about those is that they provide an in-depth understanding of you that the user controls. They can decide whether they're going to read it. They can decide whether they're going to download it. And once they do, they've risen to another level of engagement with your organization that's really valuable. So, Nicole was talking about beliefs and values. White papers and ebooks are a great place to give people an in-depth understanding of who you are, what you believe in, what your ideas are, and to provide value. which is another key element that Nicole and I always talk about. Give, always give before you expect to get, right? Give value in your white papers and your ebooks. Be generous with your knowledge. And all of these are ways for you to do that, really. And that will cause a much greater engagement. Business cards is kind of hilarious. I haven't been given out a lot. Nicole, have you?
I have
Oh,
actually,
wow.
I have again, just because I've been starting to get out there in the world, and it's actually really fun. It's it's nice to have them. I mean, most of the time when I'm interacting in person and meeting new people, we're using that feature on LinkedIn where you can share the code, and I love that. But a lot of times it's just really nice to have a nice business card. So I'm
They do
still a
seem,
fan.
yeah, they do seem different now than they did over the last 2.5 years. And they do, and we spend money on our cards. We get really beautiful stock. We spend time and money on design, and it's a cheap way to put yourself forward and in a really positive way. So we still like them. Direct mail, there's still lots of it. Snail mail is having a resurgence, which it has ebbed and flow throughout this whole digital age. But it's an effective method for some things. It can, but you also want to be mindful of ecology and people throwing things away. That's another
Yeah.
thing that we look at through all sales materials. We hate waste, and we hate contributing to the landfill. So if there's a lot of times, like one pagers, you don't necessarily have to ever print them out, but you can if you go to an event, right? So you're not printing some of these materials, you create them, but don't print them on demand. But be mindful of whether people are going to keep these, whether they're valuable enough to keep or not, right? Sharing within organizations still occurs like that. So it can still be very valuable. Email is a whole topic, but it's your sales materials, and there's a lot of rules about that. Sales flow automations are something that we use. It's a way of nurturing your clients through a process. I'm sure you get 100 LinkedIns every day saying, hey, I've got a new technology that'll make your life a lot better. So you have to make sure that you're differentiated in these instances. And something that Nicole and I are talking a lot about these days is something called empathetic marketing. And
Yeah.
this is something that has really grown through COVID during the time that we've all been sequestered. And that is that marketers recognize that everybody's moods are quite different today than it was 2.5, 3 years ago. So you want to be really thoughtful about how you're dropping into people's lives, what you're asking of them, and how you're speaking to them in an empathetic way. Nicole, would you like to amplify that in any way?
Yeah, I always do. This is like
Okay.
something that's really close to me. And it's been, let's be honest, we've been through a lot these last years. And I think it's really important to honor that when you arrive at a presentation or in all of your materials, really think about what the person on the receiving end is going through socially, health wise, economically, right? We have Black Lives Matter, we have Me Too, we have a lot, a lot, the economic crisis. We have a lot impacting people. So it's really important to show your emotional intelligence when creating every material. And it's really exciting actually because we talk a lot about marketing technology. We are big fans of using martech, and there are some technologies out there in the world that are really helping to understand people so that your marketing can really truly resonate with where people are and reach them where they are. So we've been really enjoying using some incredible technologies that give us that insight so that when we're choosing words in our materials. We're thoughtful about all that the audience is going through because the trauma is real and it is really important to respect that.
And just to give you a practical example of what that means in reality and how it's affecting you right now is in social, where most big brands are looking at sentiment, right? They're evaluating how many people are saying mean things about us, how many people are saying great things about us, what are their feelings, what are their beliefs? So this is happening right now to you in social media. People are looking at this and deciding what to serve you based on your emotions. So it's a very interesting world we live in from both sides. So one of the really super important things about your sales materials is that they be mapped to the specific parts of the funnel that you're addressing, right? So we know that at the top of the funnel, what you want to do is get the most people into your funnel, right, to attract them. So you look at the menu of sales materials that you have at your disposal, and there's more than this, but these are kind of the big ones to get people into that funnel. And you say, well, what do I have to say at this stage that's going to make them want to just come and see more? You know, clickbait used to be there, right? And it's still there. Clickbait isn't working so much anymore because people get really mad when they've been with bait and switch. But it was a top of the funnel technique. We'll do anything to get them to click through to a spot, right? So you do want to align what you do to get them into the funnel with your own, with your values and beliefs and things like that. When there's a disconnect, you're going to have high bounce rates, for example, right? So there's a ton of things that will cause people to be attracted to you. Once they get there, your job is to convince them. I'm going to use the website so easy because it's kind of the basic thing. Once they're interested in you, your job is to deepen their knowledge and desire and understanding of what you have so that they can then take the next step and convert, right? And so the conversion, that's that process, right? Educating, telling them more, showing them why it works for them, why you're the right one for them to work with. Boom, they convert. But don't forget them once they're converted. So I know you've heard this, the phrase, delight your customers and like that. It's a really worthwhile thing to think about. What will give them a little spark of joy? And especially when you're thinking about the emotional stuff we're talking about, it feels really good to spark a little joy, in the world as marketers and business owners. So we like to give stuff at that point, right? It could be content. It could be something special for them. Sometimes, so we'll encourage our clients to really spend a lot of time paying attention to the retention factor. And I'm sure you've all heard that it's a lot cheaper to retain a customer than there is to get a new one, to acquire one. This is becoming more and more important in marketing. So elevate your knowledge, your thought process about what you can do, what materials you can send, what communications, what offers you can provide to your existing customers that will bind them to you even more strongly. Nicole, do you have anything to add about the funnel process?
Not necessarily. Let's jump in and look at some best practices.
You want to so because there are a million channels today for us all to communicate and interact in, the complexity of being consistent across them has exponentially increased. This is why we're so much into technology, because how else? Technology created this big mess, and technology can solve it, right? In terms of managing your communications. Because if a client sees in Facebook you make an offer for 25% off, and then they go over to Instagram and it's 50% off, they're mad. It's like, what's going on here? Do they not have their stuff together? What's going on? So you need to be consistent. And it's not just with offers, it's how you present yourself, as we've already discussed, in terms of your color, in terms of your story, in terms of your promises, needs to be extremely consistent. The other winning money-making strategy is to always put your customer at the center of everything that you do. Start there, right? Everything will follow. If you take care of your customer really well, everything else will follow. And Nicole and I have done that with every business we've ever started. And when we've done retail projects, for example, we get the highest marks in customer service ever, because our commitment to that is that we will never have an unhappy customer. End of story. We won't do it. We will find a way to make them happy. And we have achieved that. The value is enormous, because they will communicate like crazy across all of their channels. Word of mouth is the strongest. Peer-to-peer recommendations is strongest. So be super customer centric. We last month we talked about the alignment between sales and marketing, and we surfaced the statistic that says that only 8% of companies actually align marketing and sales. So, what does that mean? It means marketing is trying to achieve a certain sort of goal, and sales has a different goal. And when you deliver leads to them, they're like, well, what's this, right? So you have to make sure that the entire journey is consistent and builds on each other, right? Another thing that we see is a lack of real focus on the purpose of each piece of material that you create, right? Oh no, I'm just going to tell them about my business, right? No, that's not a purpose. A purpose is, I want a phone call. I want a meeting. I want them to download something, right? So when you're creating your materials, ask yourself, what am I asking my customer to do? And make sure that's super clear and that you've asked them. We're constantly struggling with the hierarchy of information when we create sales materials. That means, what do you see first? What do you see second? What do you see third, right? And when you don't provide a hierarchy, here's all this stuff for you to look at. People don't know where to go. And the story, which is how you emotionally connect, is usually not told unless you create this hierarchy of information and bring them down the path. We're going to show you some examples of that shortly. And, we're also big fans of this multi-level read. And what does that mean? What it means is that, let's say you created a brochure or a one-pager. You want people to, or a landing page, because this is really important on landing pages. You want people to be able to read just the headlines and get your story, just the headlines and a subhead, and now they know more, and just the headlines, the subhead, and then even more if they're really interested. So you're offering a way for every kind of customer, right, to participate. I just want to scan it and see if I'm interested. Oh, geez, I need to know a little more. Oh, I'm really thinking of clicking here, right? So think about that when you create your materials, because the biggest problem we all have as entrepreneurs is that we think literally everything we do is the most important. So it's very hard for us to say, no, Janine, I know you love this, but that's not what the customer cares about the most. So be really mindful of how you serve your customer in that way, and knowing that you're not them. And finally, the CTA. Tons of times we don't see a call to action on materials. And that is the point where you say, click here, do this, call me. It needs to be really so prominent and never to be forgotten. You might think, for your business, you might list out, what are the 6 actions I want people to take as they go through my funnel to get to a sale. And then you decide which calls to actions are appropriate for your various materials that you create. So these are some of the best practices. Nicole, anything to add?
Yeah, just, on the landing pages, and, people are always wondering, or maybe they're a little shy about having a lot of calls to action, but it can the call to action can be not just heavy hitting, only, book a meeting. It can also be that take on that multi-layered approach that Janine was talking about and give people the opportunity to dive in for more. Maybe I'm evaluating your software platform or, your service, and I just want to dig in a little further to understand, make sure that you have the right partnerships, you have the right, alignment, that you understand me in my profession and my function as a reader. So that can, those calls to action can be really, really helpful to get into deeper levels of content and information in your site. And I can't tell you how important information architecture is here. And we're helping clients with websites all the time, right? And it's just really important that you're bringing people along, as Janine was talking you through with the funnel and, with the multi-layered read. There are a heck of a lot of people, the majority of which, if you watch your optimization, they're not spending a lot of time on your page. If you've got to give them just enough to be able to make that decision and that call to action. So it's either deeper information, right? So that they can better make a decision, or it's the ultimate purchase, book a meeting, what have you. So, we have calls to action all over our website, and every landing page we do with a client, we just make it crystal clear that there's a lot you can do to engage with us. And websites being such an important channel, you gotta ask for what you want.
And there they are. So the reason why we put up this slide is just to remind you that there's many different types of websites, and you should think about the kind that's right for your business. And they have different imperatives. So like take an e-commerce website. They're not going to tell you a hell of a lot about their details, about why and knowledge and stuff. Their job is to get you to come to the site, find the product you want, put it in the cart, and press purchase. And everything that they do on an e-commerce website is designed to do that. And then, by the way, the abandoned cart, which comes when you ran away afterwards. So that's a job, right? The B2B site doesn't have the same job. The B2B site is much more educational, because the B2B sale is not going to be like put it in the cart and press purchase, right? It's going to be more of a consultative sell, likely. And in that case, you have to let your client know that you are going to work with them, that you understand them. Back to this understanding the customer, that kind of thing is elevated in importance. Blog sites are great for thought leadership. You want to, let's say you're a speaker or a public person, right? You want people to really know what your content's about, what your beliefs are, what value you're bringing, how you're helping people think about things differently, right? And so that's more of a blog thing. Portfolios, obviously, for people who want to show stuff that they've done. You find lots of artists and photographers and graphic designers using a portfolio approach. Events are clear. Their job is much like e-commerce, but they have to make you want the event really badly, right? And personal branding websites. We do a lot of personal branding in our work. And positioning yourself on a personal branding website is really very similar to any product or service that you might sell, right? You're really thinking about, what is it that I'm offering to my customer that they really want and need? And it should be very benefit oriented to them, because you're putting this forward to them. But there's a lot of validators. So it's, is your personal branding site meant to help you get into the C-suite and onto boards? Is it meant to help you be a speaker? Is it meant, to support other projects that you're doing, a business. Both Nicole and I have done a lot of executive branding. Nicole, do you want to talk a little bit about the executive branding? Because it probably would be relevant here.
Yeah, sure. And to the point Janine's talking about these being specific websites, in some cases they can be combined too,
Yeah.
right? So that your about page is really a lot, maybe it contains a lot about your personal brand or your personal executive brand. And I know the Leadership Global community has a fair amount of coaches and folks who are consultants. And so with each of you, this is a really important point where people can get to know you on a much deeper level. And so don't hesitate to really share more about, don't just necessarily have a bio, but make sure you've got the testimonials in there on your about page. Make sure you have links to your thought leadership, the most recent articles you've written in your blog and whatnot. But this is a place where people establish credibility and trust, very importantly. And so we encourage you to, have this, page and or site that's dedicated to your personal brand, and, allow that to be really meaty so people can get to know you.
And just to illustrate that, we work with a lot of investment funds. And investment funds, one of the reasons the biggest reason people put their money into an investment fund is because of the manager who they know, the manager of that fund who they know and trust.
Fund manager.
So, fund manager, right. So it's really important, as Nicole was saying, on the hybrid side, it's really important that the fund manager's personal brands be elevated in the company messaging, right? So just to illustrate how that works. Obviously nonprofit sites are different too, and sites that are there, policy sites. So just the only reason we're listing these is so that you're thoughtful about what kind of site do I have? Which ones of these things do I want to combine? How do I serve my customer the best in these, with my website, right? So we thought it'd be fun to look at some, and we thought it would be fun to look at some in the coaching area, right? And so here's one that's pretty good, right? And let's talk about why it's good, right? So one thing you see immediately is that she's looking right at the headline, right? This is hierarchy of information stuff. We want them to see that they get an impression of her. She's happy. It's super clean, right? She brings her eye right over to that message. And her message is that you have a special gift, right? And that she's going to bring it out, right? So it's clear, simple. You don't have any choice of where else to look. Now look across her top navigation. See, she's got her about. Clearly, you want to know more about her before you're going to engage with her. She has a blog. This is where she gets to deepen your knowledge of what she cares about, what she believes in, that kind of stuff. And then she's just like, let's go, get started, call to action, right? And which is great. And then she has shop. I don't know what she's selling there, to be honest, but whatever she's selling, it's clear that you might go investigate if you like her, right? But undoubtedly, she's got your learn more. You're going to learn more about how and what and that kind of stuff. So she's going to bring you through message by message. It's kind of good. Nicole, do you want to say anything about this?
No, I just want to highlight that it's 9:45, so we might want to kind of roll through these examples really quickly, just so we can have conversation with the folks who are on the call.
Let's do that.
Okay.
This was also cited as a top site. We wouldn't agree with that, and you probably can see why. I can barely read her name. Right? When you use photography, be really super careful. If legibility is number one, if it's not legible, I don't care how good it looks, right? You can't have it. And look, I can't even read her navigation here. So beware, choose your photography wisely, which is our next topic. I know that you can see which one is more engaging, but let's talk a little bit about why. First of all, she's smiling with her eyes. This is something that photographers will tell you to do. So next time you take a picture, remember this: smile with your eyes, right?
Great
And
pro tip.
and she's also doing a little bit of turtling. We call this turtling. You go like that. It makes you not have any of this, and it makes your whole face kind of get, emphasized. She's also got a really warm smile. Now we look at the woman underneath, right? She's flat. She's not smiling with her eyes. But another key thing to look at here is the lighting. See the lighting on the woman's face on the top versus the lighting, which is flat on the bottom. So this is what a good photographer difference makes. This is the difference a good photographer makes. I know I could get that. So you want your photo to be strong, it's specific, there's no distractions. If you're gonna have like this woman on the bottom has no background, that can be very good because you can plop yourself into different colored backgrounds and situations. But she actually has a color. So now you have to strip it out. So either have a background or don't have a background, but don't have a little bit of background, right? We
I
also
just
want
want
to,
to add one more thing about photography, and I know we're going to go into it more, but we embarked on a journey of redoing our photography, and we shared the story of that in some tips, and I'm going to put that in the chat because, as Linda also put in the chat and highlighted, photography is phenomenally important these days, and it's mind-blowing how few people invest in it properly. It's so worthwhile to have a really good photographer who's truly capturing your essence and the leadership team's essence, because we're not meeting in person as we used to. And so what's going to give them a feel for who you are and how you show up in the world, right? Then having really kick butt photography. So invest, invest, invest. I'm going to put a little article in the chat about some tips there. And we're always happy to talk about photography. Janine and I have produced hundreds and hundreds of shoots for brands to help tell their story and for leadership, executive branding, leadership teams.
One way to make sure your money goes as far as possible with photography is when you get that great portrait photographer, make them do a whole bunch of other photos for you as well that you'll use in social, you'll use on your brochure, your website, and your brochures. All these shots, this was for a accessories brand. You want to show, like, you always want the thing that says, this is what it is. Here it is at retail. It's a retail product, right? And then you want to say, hey, here's our differentiators. Like, here's how you use it, right? Here's the yoga woman. Here's the woman at the hotel. There's one that's got it in her bathroom. There's Nicole on the upper right because we saved on model fees. So
right?
You don't need to pay a bunch of money to models. You need some good makeup, some cool clothes, and you drive around with your photographer and you get a whole slew of photography, and it'll be cheaper than buying stock in the long run. So this was something we did for this product, and they're timeless. We did it for New York City. We've done it for lots of different clients. Brochures, quick thing. What you see here, clean, clear. They're making your eye go where they want you to go, right? And it's just a threefold brochure, easy to pick up, friendly. Going fast here. This we included this because here you get two brochures for the price of one. In other words, one piece of paper, you can cut it in half. You got two brochures. They're not 9.5 by. They're not the same size, but unusual sizes also stand out. So you can save money by doing some unusual things like that. Just don't make it a die cut because that'll make it more expensive. Just take your piece of paper and say, hey, could I cut it in half? Could I do something different? What else is nice about this brochure is though things can get very boxy on brochures, they use these lines and colors to make it much more fluid. So it's an interesting design. Here's not an interesting design. And you can see why. Nobody's going to read this. This is like hard. This is why we're talking about easy and hard. This is hard. Nobody's going to do this. So you want to, and this is somebody who everything was way important to them, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's just that's the curse of the day is everyone thinks all their information's so important. It's really important to filter.
so
Yeah.
this is the famous one pager we were talking about before. We like to do them for speaker sheets in particular because they will have everything a booker needs to know to bring you onto their podcast, to have you do a panel, whatever it is, and it'll demonstrate your experience, what your the different types of things that you do, your bona fides. It's a really valuable tool, and we do that part of our personal branding all the time. And just for fun, we thought we'd show you our one pager. And so what you see here is that we're using a lot of circles because our logo has circles out front. Oh, out front circles. So we're reinforcing that. We also have brand colors, right? And we also included our Ikigai here because the Ikigai is a great tool. It's a snapshot of everything we do, and we use it as a jumping off point to talk about the different things that different clients might be interested in. So it pretty much has everything you need on it. And that's what you want your one pager to do, including clients. Everybody wants the validation. So also in your materials, just a quick point, make sure that you validated yourself and your claims. And the way you do that is not by talking about yourself, because who believes Janine thinks she's great, so what? But if other people say that I'm great, you might pay attention, right? So that's the theory behind validation.